to have more kids. Because if you're going to get a check for each kid you have, right? Or maybe you're going to take a kid from foster care, welfare, from the foster care system, and then you're going to get another check for that kid. So some people live off the government that way.
All right, but that's also, and I'm not discounting your story, that's also an anecdotal story
Yeah.
as opposed to an actual figure.
So
So
where I'm going with this, sorry, again, and I'm going back to Romania, you have to pay something to the system before you take advantage of it, so you feel the pain.
But who takes care
If
of the
you don't-
child? What happens? If
No, you
one
have
is-
to work minimum 2 years in order to be eligible for this. So I had a friend who had his own company. His wife, was, unemployed, yet he hired her on papers and paid extra because they knew they're going to have kids, so she can be eligible to stay home and benefit of that social network.
I see.
So I'm like, why are you paying your wife? She doesn't work. I mean, that's fine, I have half of the pay, whatever, but at least she's going to benefit of this.
That makes sense.
Well, so the question is, does it work there?
Right now, in this form, works in Romania and in Hungary.
What about taxes? I mean,
Taxes, everybody's complaining about taxes. They are out of the roof and they're high, just like in Canada. You go across, they are the ones producing gasoline, and look, how much is gas here and how much is gas there.
now, Brian, if it works there, even though, as we are hearing, there's high taxes, why wouldn't that work here? We're already paying taxes.
So you're also, so if you're factoring, there's several things to factor in. One, there's cultural differences that you have to look at across nations as well.
And size.
There's the size, also the currency backing for it. So, Romania is part of the EU. Is it? Or they? Sorry,
It's part of the EU, but it's not on the euro.
Okay, so
They have their own monetary system.
Okay, whereas the U.S. uses, it's basically the U.S. dollar, which is essentially the world currency,
Yep.
if you want to look at it that way. So if you could, it's not so much that you couldn't say a system wouldn't work here. Again, we're completely speaking hypotheticals here. The main thing that people bring up with it is A, the taxation issue, B, the fact that if you produce, that you have to pay, if you don't have, that in addition to taxes, the way that you pay for this program is by printing more money. Printing more money leads to hyperinflation because then you devalue currency, similar to what's happening in Venezuela at the moment. However, Venezuela, again, smaller country, doesn't have as much. Their world currency doesn't have as much value as the U.S. dollar does. So you would have a staggered hyperinflation issue that would come up if the U.S. were to produce more money to help pay for these programs. However, that's not a long-term solution to it. Long story short, to answer your question, I can't say whether it would or would not work here, but there are different factors in place that you have to consider. Also, you have to look at how the government is structured over there. Again, you said there was a king or a dictator, rather.
That was during communism.
During communism.
During communism, it was a dictator, and
Right.
all this that I'm talking about, parents being during communism, you had only 6 months paid
Okay.
leave by the government, by the socialist and communist government, only 6 months. That was it. After that, they took more the model that's up in the northern and Scandinavian states, and probably took the model, from them to, like you have to pay something in the system before you're eligible to get something back from the system. And you have set times, of course, with everything. It's not just like you live forever. And if your job is still around, you have that security. You can go back and do that job, just like in Canada. In Canada, it's 1 year paid by the government, and you can go back to your previous job to work there. So they can fire you, because you weren't working for 1 year.
Here's my question too, though. So we use examples of the Scandinavian countries and examples of Romania.
Mm-hmm.
What were the differences there? How would you say they veered off from each other? Since they both, again, you said Romania has more of a communist, or had more of a communist socialist type of system, whereas I guess in the Scandinavian countries they have more of a democratic socialist background.
That's a very good question. So I think, this is my living through it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I give you as an example, as a boy, I did sports for free. Free. Okay? And I played water polo. And then boom, everything was over. Communism, it's over. Socialism, it's over. Now we're free, we're a democratic country. We are capitalist. And suddenly we have to pay. I'm like, wait a second. I wasn't paying for this before. I can afford to pay this much you're asking me, but we have to put water in the pool, like somebody has to pay for that, The company that was sponsoring the pool anymore is not sponsoring the pool anymore, so do you want to play water polo? Yes or no? Yes, I want. Then make your parents pay for it. But you're asking an enormous amount of money, like You do sports, and then suddenly they were being told, go home and bring back $1,000 if you still want to do these sports. You know, like you just can't. So I had to give up that. It was something similar on the same scale. It was enormous money.
But wasn't the standard of living higher, for example, in Sweden, you would say, relatively speaking, than Romania, right?
It was.
A much higher standard.
Even
today,
even
they have a
today,
very high standard
yes,
of living in
yes.
Sweden, for example.
Now going back, you know, like why they still have this type of services or social services in Romania, and that's because, you know, this is a very small example, you know, with sports. Okay, we can get rid of sports, but people were, during communism, basically it was like a drug, you know, like you had a guaranteed job, a guaranteed place where you stay, supposedly food too up to the 80s. But then, you know, everything changed because he wanted to pay back the debt. That's why I was bringing up this paying back the debt and all that. So you had food. So you had good life. Supposedly good medical health care. Yeah, up to the 80s. You know, to those standards. You know, free schooling, free universities. You know, like if you qualify for it. So it wasn't like, oh, I want to go to university and just went to. No, you had to take an exam, and for one seat you had 60 students. So it was a very competitive exam to take to enter. Even when I went and I did my studies in undergrad in the 90s, you know, for one seat it was 15 students. So I had to sit down, they tell you like, okay, this is your test material, and you had to take a test. And only 30 out of like 600 made it into that year. So they select, it's free, but they select, they don't want anybody just go there and then sit around. No. You have to qualify for that. So you had certain...
I'm sorry, so what would happen to the students that didn't qualify for it?
They went and they did all the programs, so they started working. Okay, so in communism there wasn't a person that hadn't had a job. You weren't supposed to loiter around. The police was walking, if they saw you were loitering around, what's your job, blah, 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 and if you don't have a job or they called you, you're a menace for the society. And they throw you in a jail.
Oh my God.
Seriously, I mean, those people. No, you were walking on the street and it's funny, but...
Can we do that here? Because
Were you appointed a job like the kids who didn't make it? They said you're going to do this.
No,
have this for you.
Well,
how
when,
do you get
when
it?
you finish high school. Okay?
Yeah, right. That's what I mean. Yeah.
You have 3 months to decide you're going to make it into university, or you're going to work in a factory, or you're going to work on a construction site. And if you work in any of those, right, then you went to this bureau, whatever it's like here, Bureau of Labor, and they sent you somewhere. Okay, your point and duty to work, it's here.
I have a question. Let's say the guy gets to be 23 years old and he went to the factory. What are the opportunities from the factory to get out of the factory?
Oh, you could work your way up. Matter of fact, I use an example of my uncle.
Yeah.
Okay, who's an engineer, and
Yeah.
now they live in Austria. And they ran away from the system in 1987, which is kind of funny because 2 years later the whole thing just collapsed.
Right. Okay.
But for them, they were in their early 40s with 2 kids.
Yeah.
Okay, and they had a chance just to go to the country next door, Hungary, that happens to have a border with Austria. And through the grapevine, they heard like, okay, there's this whatever, and they don't want to tell us, you know, even up to date, which is, you know, like who cares now, you know, like it's all over. How they made it on the other side of the border, and they seeked asylum, you know, like what is it called? Like a status, like okay, we're being oppressed in Romania, you know,
Right.
Political status basically, political status. And they were going back and forth. Oh, do we want to go to New Zealand, Australia, or Canada? Okay, and eventually they decided to stay in Austria. Okay, but him, and I'm using him as an example. Okay, he finished 8 years. That was mandatory. 8 years of school.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you go either to high school or you go to a trade school. That's when your fate is decided, you know, you're going to end up in a factory or in construction.
Your fate is decided.
I haven't finished
I
it.
like the way you put that.
In order
Yeah.
to go to the high school,
Okay.
you have to take an exam, an entry exam.
Right.
Which, by the way, I failed. I didn't make it into high school. Okay, so you take an exam, and it's a very, I mean, for me it was mindless because I love biology. And the exam was in Romanian literature. Like, I don't care about, you know, Romanian poets and all that, who idolizes the socialism and the communism, right? And that
Yeah.
was it, you know. I just don't care. I hate the system, you know. It was like, I don't like it, you know. My parents didn't like it, you know, like, but we have to stay quiet because if not, they come and they put you in a van and they take you away to a labor camp. And yes, that was existing just like now in North Korea, you know.
That's pretty scary. It's a scary thought.
Well, it's scary.
To a guy like me.
If you live there and you know the rules, then you know who you talk to when you keep your mouth shut and all that. You're being taught, you know. So yeah. So anyhow, so I failed at the exam, so I ended up in a trade school. I did 3 years of trade school, and I was supposed to work, but everything fell, communism fell and all that, so it wasn't anymore, you have to work and all that. So I did work, and also I finished high school as, I don't know what to say, like I was going in the evening to finish high school, okay?
Okay, nice one. Yeah.
Night school basically. You work during the day and you go to school in the night, and that was my uncle too, during poor communism, okay? So he was working in a factory as a machinist, doing his night school, and after that he was studying hard during the night, and then eventually he made it and he was accepted to an engineering program where he met my aunt, and that's all in the 70s.
Wow.
He came from a small village and worked himself up to be an engineer. So it wasn't like you didn't have a chance of it totally cut out, you know. It's just like, you know, if you study hard, you have to work here, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And still go to school, because you have to provide after a certain age, of course, you know, I'm talking now when you're in college, right? So you still work hard. I mean, I did my master's degree here at Johns Hopkins. I was working and then going and doing all the schooling in the evening, you know. I still had to work, you know, like, it's fair. I think it's fair to work, you know, like, you have to work in order to have some kind of income and in order to pay somebody off, you know. And I think it's socialism in truth. I mean, that was a good form of socialism. You had a chance. I mean, you don't have to pay for schooling, but you had to work hard, and then you had to study, and then you made it, and that was his path. Or if you had wealthy parents, then you studied from the beginning and you just made it to college.
But we don't have, for example, there's a lot of people here that don't work and they don't throw them in, like, you know, homeless people in California, they don't throw them in a,
But they are by choice homeless.
What,
Sometimes.
what here?
Sometimes. I would say sometimes, because you could go and work at Walmart or at Home Depot, and you work your way up. When I came to this country, I was washing windows in Baltimore. And then eventually I was working hard, studying and all that, and I worked my way up. I mean, it's...
So Brian, what's your take on that? I mean, it's we obviously there are several areas in the United States where the homeless situation is really, you know, high.
I mean, I live in D.C. The homeless situation's pretty high over there. I wouldn't say. I'd say
Programs, they could say like, hey, if you come and you go to this program, you have a place where you stay, but you have to do this.
So there are certain programs available, but a lot of them are being rescinded. So one of the biggest hospitals over there that we have for homeless people, or one of the biggest shelters that they had, they just recently tore that down. And they were part of that, the idea was that we were going to build several smaller shelters that we didn't need the zoning for. So now you have more people that are out on the street for it right now. There are fewer instances where you have job training for people that are on the street right now. Now you have your example of you coming here washing windows, and that's an opportunity that is possibly available to some people. But
It's
you also
just one, you know.
no. Like I said, that's your story. There's also incidences where, again, depending on how long you've been on the street, if you look a certain way, people aren't going to hire you. It doesn't matter like how much you want to try to apply for a job. And also, there's a certain point where depends how long. Again,
No, I agree with you. I mean, you know, like as a homeless person, you walk into an office setting, they will not hire you.
I agree with that. And there's also certain situations where after a while you hear rejection, you keep hearing no so many times. It gets
True.
but there's a high percentage that are mentally ill as well, that actually need serious help that are on the street. There shouldn't be on the street.
There's that aspect of it.
That's the sad part, is when you'll come across people yelling to themselves and talking to themselves. You know, when you see the mentally ill. We have to wrap it up, this episode of it. Thank you guys, Sebastian, Brian.